Hey everyone, welcome back to the Unreal Engine tutorial series where we're making our own first-person shooter game. In part 1 and 2 we covered setting up the project and adjusting the camera from a third-person perspective to first-person view. We also went through some basic blueprints to set up health and armor for the player and to set up a widget so we can be able to view the health and armor. We've also done a damage volume so that we can be able to take away from the player's armor and health and regenerate them when we're not taking damage. Today's mostly going to be about animations. We're going to set up a mesh for our main character and set the animation for the character so we can be able to move around, walk, run and jump. And I think that should be enough to cover a full video. By the end of the tutorial you should be able to know how to change a mesh for your character. You should be able to set up a basic blueprint for your animation and a blend space as well, so you can be able to transition between certain animations. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, then let's get started. Okay, so before we start, some people were asking me what they can do with the damage volume, and one of the things that you can potentially do, and you should have this with the starter content when you create a new project. If you look for fire particles, or you can download this for free as well from the marketplace, and you can just add that, as you can see, to where the damage volume is, and then once the player walks into it, it starts taking away from the armor or health. Right, moving on to today's tutorial, there's a couple of things that we need to download, so I've already gone ahead and downloaded most of the things that we need. So we're going to need a mesh for our main character, and I've also downloaded some animations, and finally I've downloaded some assets for the weapons that we're going to be using later on in the game. And let's move on to show you where you can actually get most of these assets for free, so you can be able to download it to start your project. So when it comes to characters and animations, my advice is to go to Mixamo. It's an Adobe website, so it's trusted. Select your favorite character and download that from there. Add it to your project. And once you've selected the character that you like, you can then go to the animation page and download a set of animations. So go ahead and download that. Then moving on to the marketplace so we can get our weapon assets. If you type in military dark, this is a military weapon dark set. There's also another set that's called military weapon silver. Go ahead and download those and add them to your project as well. As I mentioned, I've already added the character mesh to my project, so that's the first thing we're going to be working on, is to change from the regular mannequin to the character that we've just downloaded. We're going to go to the character blueprint, go to the viewport tab on the top and click on the character mesh, so you click on the character itself. Once you've done that, go to the right hand side, select the name of the mesh or the character that you've downloaded. In my case, that will be, I've named it Soldier or SOL. So we'll select that. That's all plugged in. As you can see, the camera has been reset, so quickly just adjust that back to how it was before. And let's go ahead and give that a quick test. So don't worry about animations, of course, because we're going to work on that in a minute. But just to make sure that the camera is not actually going inside the character. Okay, so that looks good. Now, just going into the animation folder, just to give you an idea. So this is a very simple animation set. For now, it's just for education purposes and for you to be able to work with animation to start with. So for now, it should be all good. Okay, so right click inside your animation folder, select animation, and let's create a new animation blueprint. Make sure that you type in the name of your character and assign the animations to that character. So on the bottom there, for the target mesh, type in the name of the character that you've downloaded, select that character and press OK. Let's double click to open it up, and we're going to be working inside here to set our animation blueprint. So the first thing you want to do is right click and type in state machine. So we need a new state machine so we can be able to get the animation to work together. And we'll call that walk and run. So just to show you how it works, if we plug the state machine into the output to the result node and then go inside the state machine, so double click to open it up. Once you open it up, of course it's still empty, so we're going to drag out from the empty node and add a new state, and we're going to name that one idle. Drag out again from the idle and add another state, and we'll call that walk and run. And of course we want to be able to go from idle to walk and run and vice versa, so let's drag back from walk and run back to idle so we can have a transition between being idle and walking or running. Right, so if we double click on idle, we'll go in here and let's add a actual animation just so you can get an idea of what we're doing here. So in the animation tab on the right side, just type in idle and drag one of the idle animations. In my case I've only got one, so the rifle one, and let's plug that into the output result. And once you've done it, then you can see that the character has gone from a T pose to a idle pose. Okay, perfect. So we know this is working. Before we can go any further, let's actually go back and create the blend space, because we're gonna need that at some point while we're creating our animation blueprint. So go back to your animation folder, right click, select animation, and let's create a blend space. Again, don't forget to assign this to your character, so type in the name of the character and select the character that you want to assign it to. Name it whatever you like, and when you're happy, double click to open it up. And the first tip I'm going to give you inside here is to go up to where this space is and click on the show animation names, because this will be really helpful later on to make sure that this is checked. Right, so let's work on our blend space. The first thing we're going to need to do in the settings, just to name the axes, we're going to name top one, which is the horizontal direction, and the vertical is speed. Our speed, we're going to set the max speed to 600. You can set it to whatever number you like. And then with the direction, we'll do minus 180 to 180, so that will be like the full rotation basically. Cool, so this is all set for now. We're going to come back to it in a minute. Let's go back to our animation blueprint and make sure that everything is set, so when we need to come back to the blend space, we'll just set it up real quick, drag it into our animation blueprint, and then we're ready to go. Right, so back to the animation blueprint, we have our idle, we've got our walk and run, there's one more that we need, and again we're just doing the very basic animations for now. So the last one we'll do is going to be jump, so let's drag out from idle, add a new state, and let's name that jump. And again, we need to be able to go from jumping to idle to walking and running and vice versa, so let's make sure that everything is connected back and forth. And then jumping is quite simple, so we'll just double click to open up, and again type in jump in your animation list on the right side, drag it out and plug it into the result node or the output node, and that should be your jump animation all sorted. Now we're going to need to do some simple coding, and it's blueprint based, so don't worry, we're not going to do C++. It's basically just working on the transitions to make sure that the character is going from the state of idle to jumping to walking or running. Those arrows that you see between nodes, those are called transitions, That's at least what I'd like to call them. And this is where the coding happens so that you can be able to, as I mentioned, transition from one animation to another. So we'll double click to open one of the transitions just so I can show you how it works. So we'll open an easy one to start with, which is the jumping animation. So inside here, we need to go up to the event graph tab. So we're going to drag out from the event blueprint update animation, and we'll cast the third person character to start with. And then the object will be the pawn owner. So type in pawn owner, and the one you want is try get pawn owner. And then as the third person character, we want to make sure that the character is falling. So if you type in is falling and select that node, and then the return value, drag out from that, and we're going to promote that to a variable, and we'll name that is falling. So we'll need to use that later on. If you compile now, you'll see that there's an error, but don't worry about it. It's because we haven't done the rest of the animation. So for now, we can save that and leave it as it is. And that is pretty much the transition between your idle and jumping. At least the blueprint side of it is done. Going back to the state itself, all we need here is to take that variable that we created, which is falling, drag that out. We need to get this variable, and then once you have it, drag out from it, and we're gonna do equal to, connect it to the can transition, and then we'll need to make sure that this is checked. So that's basically telling the engine that if the character is falling, then we can transition to the jumping animation. And then all we need to do now is copy all of this, and we're gonna do it reversed, so just so we can have the transition back into idle, walking, or jumping. So basically we've done the idle to jump transition, and now we're gonna go back and paste that into the jump to idle transition, and the only difference is we need to make sure that it's unchecked. So if the character is not falling, then we don't need to do the transition. And then we'll do the same thing to jump to walk and run. So again, walk to jump will be checked, and jump to walk will be unchecked, and that will be pretty much all the transitions that we need to work on between the jumping and the walking, running being idle. Now that you have a better idea of what we're working with, we're gonna do the one that's a little bit more complicated. So that's gonna be the transition between idle and walking and running. And for that, we're gonna need to use the blend space because, as I mentioned, it's not a very straightforward transition. So that's what we're gonna be working on now. Let's go back to the blend space, double click to open it up. So the first thing we're gonna do is change the interpretation time to 1. And then basically what you need to do is drag out all the animations. The running animations will be at the top because this is the highest speed. Anything walking will be in the middle, and idle will be on the bottom. And there you go. This is exactly why I've mentioned to make sure that the animation names are showing, because when you're doing this sometimes, and especially if you're working on, you know, a bigger project, there's always a chance for you to drag out the wrong animation. That way you can actually see what animations are set on the blend space, and if there's anything that need to be changed, you can delete it and change it and make sure that it's all set correctly. So for us to be able to test this out, the best way to do it is to hold down your shift key, and then you can just hover over the animations, and that will show you how the player or the character is going from one animation to another and how the transition looks. Right, perfect. So our blend space is all set. Let's go back to our animation blueprint and bring that in to be able to do the transition between idle, walking and running. We're going to start with the walk and run state, so double click to open that up. And then in here, all you need to do is drag out the blend space that we've just created, plug that in to the output node, and of course we need the speed and direction, so drag out from the speed, and the same thing for direction. Let's go back to our blueprints in the event graph, and this is where it's going to get a little bit complicated, and this is because Unreal Engine has decided to remove or unlink a very convenient node that used to be used in this type of transition. And I've been looking into it, and there's a way around it, but it's not convenient and it's a bit complicated. And to be fair, I'm still looking into it to see if there's a better way to do it. And then in the next video, we're going to be talking about retargeting animation, so we might be able to do it in a completely different way. But for now, I'm just going to show you. So if you could just please follow along in what I'm about to do, and that should get the animation to work, or the transition at least. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag out from as a third person character, and we're going to get rotation and get velocity. So again, drag out, type in get velocity and get actor rotation. And then normally we would be able to drag out and calculate direction, but this is the node that has been unlinked from the cast to third person character. So we're just going to right click and type in calculate direction, and then we're just going to add this node in here, and then let's plug in the velocity and direction as well. So get velocity, get actor rotation, that's going to go into the calculate direction node, velocity to velocity, obviously rotation to rotation. Then from the return value, drag out and type in set direction, and we're going to select the set direction node. And from get velocity, we're going to drag out again and type in vector length squared and select that node. From there, we're going to set the speed. So again, type in set speed. And then finally, and bear with me here, we're going to cast from the third person character directly to set the direction, because that is going to be the only way we're going to connect the calculate direction to understand where the direction and the speed is. And then from the direction, we'll connect that to the speed and return it all the way back to the variable that we originally created, which is the sFalling variable. So this is how it should look like. Feel free to pause here and just have a quick look to see how everything is connected. Right, so let's compile and save, and we're going to go back and just do one final thing, which is to set the speed and the direction for the walk and run animation transitions. And that's going to be very similar to what we've done with the jump animation. So basically we'll go from idle to walk run first. Let's get that speed variable that we've created earlier. So we'll drag that out and get speed. And then we're going to drag out from the speed variable, and we're going to do a float greater than or equal to float. So if you type in float, it should give you all the variables, and you just need to select the greater than or equal to. And we'll set that to, let's say, 10. So what that means is when the player is at a speed of 10, then you can transition from idle to walking or running. So that is what we're doing here. Plug that in, and that's pretty much it. So we just need to compile that and save it. And then we're going to do the same thing for all the other transitions, except of course when we are setting the transition between going from walking or running back to idle, the node we're looking for is going to be reversed, so it's going to be less than or equal to rather than greater than or equal to. So that's what we're going to do now. If you follow along, we should be able to get all of that done, and then we'll be ready to go. And that's pretty much it. I know this is very basic, and again, the animations I'm not 100% happy with. But again, of course, the idea behind this is just to understand how animations work and give you something to work with as a starting point. And we're going to be picking up next time, as I mentioned, to talk about retargeting animation. But this will bring us to the end of this tutorial, and I hope you were able to learn something today. And please do let me know if this is something you're interested in, or if you have any questions or anything you'd like to see in Unreal Engine specifically. And I can always make shorter videos just to explain one feature or any questions you have. But as always, thank you very much for watching. Until next time.